Bed Talks with Alanda and Chelsea. On this episode of Bed Talks with Miss Cress and Miss T, chatting with Mr. T, a lifelong teacher, and his perspective and experience with the Nova Scotia education system. All right. Thanks for meeting with us today, Mr. T. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been teaching?
Well, I started teaching 32 years ago in the Annapolis Valley, and I've been teaching mainly science-related courses over that 32-year period at the high school level.
Awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about inclusive education today. So throughout your experience of teaching, did you notice a shift in inclusive education?
Absolutely. It's definitely apparent in the high school setting. I would say 6 years ago, things became much more inclusive in my high school, that's for sure. And I started seeing more students in science at the grade 10 level and in the grade 11 biology classes as well. That required more adaptations and more IPPs and that sort of thing. So that started, I would say, about 6 years ago.
All right. So you said you start to see some students who are on IPPs. Can you talk a little bit about those students and how you made their IPPs fit to the classroom?
Sure. So I would say that most of those students are on the autistic spectrum, somewhere on that spectrum. And what tends to happen is prior to classes starting in September, we have organizational days and we meet with the intensive resource teachers who have background information on these students. And so we're basically briefed on major concerns surrounding each particular student. And from there, based on recommendations from the intensive resource teachers, we would construct IPPs to suit the students.
So, as a teacher, what was your involvement in the IPPs, or were you involved in the making of the IPPs?
So as a science and biology teacher, I'd be looking at specific course outcomes and how those could be adapted to meet the needs of the individual student. And so what happens in the case of IPPs generally is 2 or 3 outcomes will be set in accordance with the student's abilities. And those could be subject to modification as the semester progresses. So having said that, we would be in communication with the intensive resource teachers and making sure that what we had set as outcomes would be appropriate as time went on in the semester.
Can you give a little bit or a few examples of some different adaptations that you would make for those students?
So when you create an IPP or adaptations as such, we use a system known as TINET. So if you go into TINET and attempt to set up either adaptations or IPPs, there are pull-down menus that would suggest various adaptations that you could use. So I think most teachers, by and large, stick with those suggestions in the menu. So for example, you would have things such as allowing more time for completion of work, decreasing the amount of work expected from the student, providing an alternate location for assessment, providing quiet spaces, introducing the use of manipulatives if necessary, allowing material to be recorded so they can simply listen to it, and that sort of thing, providing notes in advance, providing written notes as you introduce work. Some students are able to use certain programs where they don't have to write; they can simply speak, and the work is recorded that way.
So as you get ready to retire, what advice would you have for a new teacher going through the Nova Scotia school system?
Well, you're going to need a thick skin, because what you're going to run into is many people with many different opinions. So, everybody's been to school at some point in their life. Some people for longer periods of time than others, but they have a preconceived notion of what school is, and they base their expectations on that, which, quite frankly, unless you're in the classroom, um, your expectations probably are not very, very realistic. So for a new teacher coming in, you're going to have to be prepared to um, accept criticism from many different levels, from parents, from the media, perhaps even from fellow teachers. You're going to have to be prepared to work long hours in terms of setting up your courses and developing resources that will be able to meet the diverse range of learners in your classroom and in the inclusion situations. You're going to have to, I think, realize that school doesn't end at 2:30 or 3:30, but it's definitely something that you're going to carry with you home and probably work till after midnight on your lessons for the next day. So that's gonna carry on for several years until you have a repertoire of materials and experience that you can draw on. So that is a given. It's not going to be an easy job. You're going to have to be prepared to deal with medical issues, people with diabetes, and people with all sorts of uh, you know traumas that they've suffered physically and mentally. Right? You're going to see more anxiety, more depression, all of this sort of thing. So you're going to be a social worker. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a nurse. You're going to have some understanding of the law in terms of parents who have custody of children and how that works, and your legal rights and restrictions as a teacher. Um, so there's going to be a real mixed bag of things that will come at you, and I guess you want to go one day at a time. Try to stay rested. Try to stay healthy. Try not to take things personally. The world will continue to spin on its axis 100 years from now, regardless of what happens. But in the short term, it can be very difficult. So work hard. I think try not to be too confrontational. Learn from senior teachers. Go easy at the beginning until you get established. Stay under the radar, because you will be under the microscope until you become a known quantity. And until then, you really have to take take guidance from your principal, take guidance from senior teachers, and listen and learn and be patient, and try not to um, you know draw too much attention to yourself initially. Test the waters. If there's certain things that have been in place in the school for a long time, people are happy with them, don't change them. And maybe they need to be changed, but just wait your turn, and it will come when you can make a difference. And I guess those are the things that I would suggest to anybody starting out.
Perfect. Good advice. All right, well, thank you for
You're
taking the
welcome.
time to chat with us today on Bed Talks with Miss Cress and Miss T.